What is going on, everyone, and welcome to the Bot Podcast, where we interview movers, shakers, and innovators and talk all things conversational interfaces. I'm your host, Chad Oda, and today we have a very special guest, Shane Mack. Shane Mack is the Chief Automation Officer at Conversocial. His company, Assist, was recently just acquired by Conversocial. So Assist is an automated assistant platform for messaging and voice. They've powered enterprise experiences such as Sephora, MGM International, Rolex, Fandango, Hyatt, 1-800-Flowers, to name a few. Previously, Shane helped build Gist, which was later sold to BlackBerry, worked at Cobalt Group, which was acquired by ADP. He is also an avid writer, accomplished musician with over 3 million downloads, investor, and published author. His wedding band was also voted the best in Seattle in 2009. So at that, Shane, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you. Where did you find all these hilarious stats?
So I found so I was actually looking at your book, and I think this must have been back in 2012 when you went and published it, and you added that thing about the wedding band right at the end of the description.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
That was my college career. Was my dad always wanted me to get a real job, and I was driven by spite and was like, I'm going to prove to him that I can make more money playing music than getting a job. And I realized people paid a lot for weddings, so I started playing weddings. Yeah,
definitely. Did you grow up in Seattle?
No, I grew up in Peoria, Illinois.
Oh, gotcha.
Moved out west. And yeah, it was great. I love Seattle. Seattle's a great city, and music and building websites and building kind of little experiments and teaching myself how to, code back in the day is how I got into tech. So it all kind of led together.
Cool. No, yeah, that makes complete sense. So before we actually get started and dive into the more sort of chatbot voice related questions, I always like to ask sort of a unique question based upon our guest background. So sort of reading your blog posts, reading, tweets you put out, hearing you speak, publicly at some of these conferences here, there was a quote that you said, constraint drives innovation. And, as I sort of look through the things that you've done, I think that sort of underlies really everything you do. Right? From the way that you've developed your platform to the way that you sort of talk about the ecosystem right now and what exactly is realistic versus what is hype. And also even how you wrote your book. You wrote it, purely only on the train, commuting between Seattle and San Francisco. So I was curious, where did that perspective come from for you? Was that something innate, or did that develop over time through specific experiences?
I think behavior, it's like what you keep doing over and over again without realizing it becomes what you realize is smart later. And probably driven by crazy ADHD to just like, I have to hyper focus or I can't get anything done. And if it takes too long, then I just get bored with it. And, what was interesting is the quote, constraints drive innovation. And I think the confidence to actually see it and understand it came from my co-founder, Robert. So Robert, has this like unique ability to see the future, and he's so humble and like doesn't care what anyone thinks on a level I've never seen, but he's like the nicest man ever. But he is the one who will be like, let's build the simplest kind of like feels dumb. Let's just play around. Like it's over here in the corner, but let's get rid of all this other baggage. And he gave me this confidence to not like, I used to say things like messaging is the future of search. And I was very much driven like by my ego to say things so big and bold that like I'm in Silicon Valley and I'm in SF and we're doing big shit. And like I was very driven by that because I thought it's what I needed to do to stand out. And then Robert, when I started working with him, he founded Geek Squad in 1993.
Yeah.
And then he was a CTO of Best Buy for 10 years. And he's 20 years older than I am. And he still is like the most youthful man ever. And I think it came from like that maturity and experience from him to be like, you don't have to like do all this like Joker stuff and say all these things that sound all big. Let's play small. Let's be the underdog. And what it's going to do is it's going to help us understand what's really working. And in technology, it's always the smallest, simplest, littlest thing that can actually scale to everything that becomes the real product and company. And that's how you discover it. And the biggest thing he said to me is when we started, we were doing agent chat. Yeah. We had 100 people in the Philippines. We had an app. You could talk to any business. We would route it to the Philippines. They would message back to you. call the business. Like Path Talk was happening, Operator Assist. We were all doing this kind of like messaging as the interface if it could be the future of search. And it was all powered by a bunch of humans that weren't the future of search,
Yeah.
like at all.
Right. Right.
And Robert said to me, he said, listen, the future is words talking to APIs and systems.
Hmm.
Let's play dumb. And I remember I honestly, it was one of those lessons in my life where he told me this key insight.
Yeah.
Constraints drive innovation. The absence of having a human will help us develop software that will take care of the things that we would use as a crutch if we had a human to fail over to. So by not having the routing to an agent when we didn't understand, you would work on error handling, better design, nonlinear flows, ways to respond in different ways from the machine to understand if it's failing over in a different like level of intensity, if they're really mad, if they're not, and all these ways to treat people. If you don't have a human, what do you do?
Yeah.
And that's, 8 years ago. And so we sat there, and I'll be completely honest with you, he gave me the confidence to also say like, screw it. I had 40 investors. I was trying to like prove to them this is big.
Right.
And I remember when we launched the first product, he goes, let's just do one thing. I go to Great Clips to get my haircut, which tells you everything about Robert. He still gets his haircut at Great Clips. And he's like, let's build an SMS bot that can book a reservation and queue it. So I say haircut to the bot, and it says the three closest Great Clips to you are 3 minutes, 7 minutes, and 9 minutes away. The wait time is 13 minutes. Would you like to put your name on the list? Yep. And then we walked into Great Clips, and we built this in like a weekend.
Yeah.
And his name was on the screen, and it said Robert Stevens, 3 minutes. And he's like, this is the future. He's like, the way we interact with these systems, this is the future. You didn't interact with the human. No human responded because the human is just a translator for systems that can't communicate.
Right.
So if language is in the middle, language becomes the ultimate translator of all APIs and systems. And he saw it, and he really sees a different kind of future. And I honestly didn't know what a chatbot was.
Yeah.
And I became the bot guy because like we have a bot company now. But my job as the leader, I thought, was don't make a lot of decisions. I follow like the David Marquez strategy. I'm trying to just build a team and empower everyone and make sure I'm building a company that can make decisions. And I thought Robert saw a future and was a way smarter futurist than I was. And I was like, we're building a chatbot company. And I remember our investors, the first day we launched this like SMS bot on TechCrunch, and they saw this like really shitty Great Clips booking engine. I swear to God, I had like so many texts of like, what happened to the like beautiful app and all the like real cool use cases? And I was like, I don't know. I think we're building a bot company. And then it was funny, a year and a half, 2 years goes by, and the complexities to just do a bot really well is insane. And then everyone starts to realize that. And then Facebook launches, and Microsoft launches a bot developer framework. And all of a sudden now, like, we look smart because we were early. But really, a lot was happening then. There's a lot of people like messing around.
Yeah.
And I think it was not being smart. It was that we just focused on that one thing that you realize, building a full platform just to do automation well is very complex. And so that constraint, I look at it through everything now.
Yeah.
Okay. That is what I used to do because I did it to like a selfish, that's just how my behavior was. Then I realized that now it's a pretty great forcing function for making all decisions because everything looks small at the beginning. I remember the day I was like, we're going to do like a 2-step bot flow with Great Clips API.
Right.
Yeah. And then you build out like a real conversational experience that can understand intents and context and change directions. And every single person has a different interaction with it and how to improve it over time and all the learning that goes on. And you're like, okay, this is a whole different thing that felt so small.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a great perspective. And, especially, aligned on top of, this ecosystem here, right? I can't think of a more pragmatic way to look at it. So you already sort of started talking sort of a bit about assists and sort of the initial, business case going into it, right? What was sort of the initial, use? And it sounds like it was, around just a simple SMS bot. So can you sort of talk about a little bit more on like the evolution of assist? And it seems to me that, maybe going back to something else you have quoted previous in the past, is that there's two types of chatbot companies, right? One are sort of like the larger vendors that maybe came from customer support, and now they're adding chatbots to have that sort of fully integrated sort of end-to-end solution. And then there were companies that were sort of built from the bottom up, that really focused on sort of the core components of what a good chatbot platform was in the context of supporting a real enterprise solution. So can you maybe talk about like what was that, evolution from starting at SMS bots and then saying, okay, well, maybe we should build out a more fully fledged platform. Like what did that process like look like?
It's painful.
Yeah.
And I think it was painful because we rebuilt the platform 3 times in 5 years,
Oh
and
shit.
we had to. You glean all these insights, and then you have to make decisions on, is the baggage that you still have going to kill you if you don't
Yeah.
change. And the market was changing because no one really knew what they were doing. I would like go to Facebook, and we were building the thing together. We were building it all as a team. And we started as the SMS channel because there wasn't messaging channels.
Right.
Nothing was open. Like I couldn't be on Messenger as a brand or a service, and I couldn't be on WhatsApp. So you could do it as like a person. So we started on SMS, and we were on consumer, and like when Robert told me, like, let's just play around. But his vision was really, which I agreed with, was the simplicity of interacting through SMS for many use cases, not all. And people get really caught up. They're like, it's not for everything. I'm like, yeah, I agree. But for almost every business in the world, you don't need an app.
Yeah.
You don't need to like have these forms on your website that then is sending an email that's all like disconnected. And so he was like, let's just plug in all of the available APIs that are public.
Yeah.
And so we started with like 30 APIs, from food delivery apps to Uber and Lyft, doing price comparison, a hotel service, great clips for haircuts, and all within one channel. You could actually get things done. Whereas search in the past had been about finding the thing to go do on a website to get it done. Now you're bringing the service into a messaging channel. And so as rudimentary as it really was an insight. And the API that we grabbed was an API called Florist One, which allowed us to do flower ordering.
Right.
And when that happened, it's funny how dots connect. So at the moment, you have this simple, like kind of like old school API. We integrate it, but I can actually send flowers via SMS, a bot, no human, using this API, and that delivers the flowers. And they're just like a service, kind of like 1-800-Flowers.
Right.
And at the same time, the VP at 1-800-Flowers sees that bot. And so I get an email from the VP, Tony Villado, and he's like still a really good friend of mine. And he said, hey, like, I want this bot. And I remember getting on the phone one day. I was like, I have like an admin panel. Like we have like a consumer product that has bots, and we don't really, we were still in the like experimental phase. We raised a little round to kind of like figure out what we wanted to build.
Sure.
We loved messaging. We loved business messaging. I was in the agent side. Robert was in the bot side. Like, what are we going to do here? Made a bet on bots really early, just plugging things in. And we always said the best BD is to just like hack their API and let them call you.
Right.
And that's what we were doing. Great Clip sent us a season assist. And then we got on the phone with them and they were like, oh, that's great. Just keep sending us more orders. And then we called it a season persist. And like, that was what we were doing.
Yeah.
Calls me. And at the same time, it's one of those things like, everyone's lucky because like opportunity meets preparation, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right. We're messing around publicly. And then Facebook calls.
Yeah.
Facebook's like, hey, we're going to launch the messenger platform and we want to focus on commerce. What's the best use case? Flowers. Heard you're talking to flowers. Will you build the same use case on Messenger for flowers and 1-800 will pay you? And that triangle really is the evolution of when I was like, okay, we'll do it because we don't know what we're doing yet.
Yeah.
That was the decision. We don't know. But I said, how much will you pay? And I get on a call with Tony Villado. I'm like demoing our admin panel, which is like shows the maps and like the analytics and stuff. And it wasn't a builder yet. And then this moment, Tony goes, I don't know, like $100,000. And I was like, $100,000? Shit. I'm like, all right. It's actually a bad way to do it. As an entrepreneur, the pain of getting out of that from that single decision without saying this is our strategy early on, that year and a half after that was really hard, because going from a consumer thing where you're trying to morph it, and then you get in this like agency land where you're kind of building custom shit and you don't have a platform. A lot of people don't get out of it. And I think that was the hardest thing, that now we have a really robust platform. And what happened after that, I mean, we got really lucky. Zuckerberg called 2 days before the announcement. He's like, 1-800-Flowers is the use case I want to make fun of on stage. And so you'll never have to call 1-800 number again. So that became the keynote story.
Yeah.
That was the launch of business messaging. We're the provider for it. And that catalyst, Fandango and Sephora and all the customers we have now, I mean, that was the moment. And then the next year was really, really hard. And I think
Hmm.
from just sharing about the space and entrepreneurs, um, that's why we had to delete the platform, because we were becoming an agency and
Yeah.
everything was custom. The single thing I realized is because we didn't have a full build, edit, and deploy tool, we had an analytics platform that could allow engineers to build bots. It was a chatbot platform, but for developers.
Hmm.
And it was a platform actually, but it wasn't for marketers and product people to build without engineers that could
Hmm.
also have integrations in it and do like more complex stuff. And I kept asking the team, like, why can't they just change the copy?
Hmm.
Like that's simple. And the answer is because chatbots are fairly complex and they have a lot of dynamic data in them. You can't change the copy because it's connected to something 9 steps ago that's saving information for that user.
Right.
But when they really explained it all to me and we got into it, I'm like, the game here is to empower non-engineers to build things, and marketers and product people, and really have a robust platform that has error handling and doesn't let them make mistakes, and like does all the checks of like staging and production, all this kind of like enterprise stuff. And we couldn't get out of it. We couldn't back out of that, because once you built all these experiences custom in the code, building a CMS on top of that wouldn't have worked. So we made the hard decision. I said, listen, September 2017, I was like, we're done. We're done doing anything on this platform. We know what we need to build. And I, as a non-engineer, and me, Shane, I want to build a platform where I can deploy a bot for myself without asking anybody on December 15th of this year. And that was the day we were launching Samsung. And so we were going to do Samsung as our first customer on the thing. And that moment was the moment where it actually became real and the platform had value. And like the reason we were able to even do a really good deal and like partner up and, combine it with Conversocial. And it's because we have a real platform now and it has integrations to what we call Switchboard, which hands off to all the agent platforms. We've integrated all the payment systems and analytics. And it's really a robust kind of thing. But it was that moment of, I asked, how many Jira tickets do we have to change copy for 1-800-Flowers? And it was like hundreds.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, engineers don't want to change copy. The brand doesn't want to ask the engineers to just change a copy. Like we have to create this, what is seemingly a basic CMS layer on top of all this complexity and integrations and work we've done and plugging in different machine learning type things for like analyzing the data, et cetera. We were doing all that, but we were doing it in the code. And that moment was the moment it all changed, because then we were able to play with selling to agencies. Agencies are using it with, Edelman's an agency we work with, or,
Yeah.
the VaynerMedia team can go build a bot and whip it up. And that allowed everyone to really be empowered to build and fly and go a lot faster. And so I think that's a key decision that we decided to do because the pain was so great. I remember people be like, I don't know if we can build a build tool, like a full to build these more complex ones. And, the team set out to do it. And the constraint there was like, I have to be able to do it without an engineer.
Yeah.
And we also have 3 months.
Right.
And so it was really, what's the V1 we can do to get there? Because we knew where we were going longer term. And since then, the platform's just gotten really robust. It's very flexible and it can work for almost all enterprises across marketing, sales, and service,
Hmm.
because it's focused just on the CMS layer that writes the words. And then everything else is an integration play. So it's very, very flexible to plug and play.
Yeah, no, 100%. I appreciate that sort of, historical step by step of how you guys got there. And I think maybe a good segue to the next question is, so you're saying, you guys started with something super rudimentary with SMS and some backend APIs. And then we've also seen, like this, other, I guess explosion of chatbots that are very like button driven on the same token. So from your perspective, like what does the maturity model of chatbots look like right now in regards to, what should an enterprise expect from like an enterprise grade experience, right? Versus like all these different, sort of mix and match, chatbots that exist now, whether it's like totally NLP or NLP with context management and, versus chatbots that are just button driven and things like that. Like what do you see is that maturity model?
There's many different approaches happening. I mean,
Sure.
it's kind of like messaging is becoming a platform, just like, the apps became a platform.
Sure.
So you're going to see a lot of different experiences, from simple marketer bots that people have fun with to kind of more robust core experiences. But I feel like the reason we did the deal with Conversocial and the reason
Right.
Josh and I were so aligned on it is I see messaging as the interface to interact with brands. like it I believe will be the main way you interact with every brand.
Right.
And it's this combination of bots and agents and bots and people that makes it a really great experience. And on the bot side, I think it has to have an OU,
Hmm.
but it needs to be focused on really specific intents until that intent can handle itself almost automatically and the CSAT is very high. So we just launched, an example would be with Sephora 2.5 years ago, but this F8, Sephora announced that their booking experience to get more women in stores for getting a makeup appointment, to get their makeup done or get a class or try on stuff, is converting 60% better than their website and their apps across all spectrums, paid, organic, etc. 45% of the people who book, there's an increase in 45% of people who actually show up to the store. And you can just understand why. Like, you're getting a message a day before, but because it has NOU and because it's able to do what we call random access navigation, which is change your mind at any time, you can say, actually, I'm busy tomorrow. Can I do Monday? And we're like, Monday's cool. Here's the 2 times. And you're like, okay, Monday's fine. And the ability to have one channel where you're able to simply change it, edit it, book it, like that use case alone takes a lot of work. Then you're driving real core business value though. And so I'm more interested in those. Like, what are the ROI driven intents? Like, where do they live and what systems do we have to integrate with? And how do we nail that intent? And then we go to try on makeup and order and actually book and reorder all your makeup. That's the next intent. Then we go to in-store feedback. Then we go to FAQs and like you're just chipping away. But that core experience also can hand over to agent. And so there's a really powerful thing where our platform has an air handling engine that always can get you to the right agent based on different intents.
Yeah.
I think that's critical. So what you see now is these endless loops of I don't understand because these bots are programmed in a way which are scripts. If you go off script, it either starts over, which sucks.
Yeah.
Doesn't save any context, which sucks. Or it doesn't have a human when I actually want one. And you just had to look at the logs to know that we should still be in a place where you're at 10% automation, 20% automation, 30%. We're going backwards from zero.
Sure.
And if you do it well, consumers love it. And, if you do it poorly, consumers hate it. And so you had to have this hybrid model. And so that's why we chose to team up and really go after it. And I think in the next 5 years is that model.
Yeah.
Like, I don't see an AI, unless there's some breakthrough that none of us can see, or the constraint I would do, there will be new companies that are bot only companies. Like, if I was going to create a retail company today, what would a retail or a new company or travel company look like if you said you can't have a call center?
Right.
You would just start completely differently. And maybe that's what it'll take to build the like AI company that is full AI. But I think it'll really come from the constraint of just, if you don't have people, how would you serve all your customers? And Amazon kind of does this, right? Like, now you can call the call center and stuff, but they were very much like, it was all self-service. And like,
Right.
the self-service was the service. Like, what is Prime? You like pay for Prime. Prime's just better service, faster, better. It's not a thing. And I think, now it's access and all these other things you get with it. But I think there's an opportunity for some brand that it started from scratch to create something that is fully automated. But for most brands in the world, I believe it's this hybrid agent bot kind of model for the next few years at least.
Yeah, no, I guess just to paraphrase really quickly, from what you're saying, it's like not only looking at the automation piece, but also looking at the messaging piece as sort of a core value differentiator, in addition to whatever that automation piece is you're using with chatbots or whatever you're trying to do with that. And then essentially, it sounds like to me that, it's very much a hybrid approach still. And I know there's a term that you guys have been using quite a lot, which is EI, which is eventual intelligence versus AI. But that being said, even with this hybrid approach, I've heard you also say that, doing the sort of iMessage chatbot at the Phillies stadium, where people could sort of order beers and then get it sort of delivered to them at their seat, is still pretty complex, right? Even with this hybrid system, today doing something like that is still, it's not an easy thing to do.
And it's a digital experience, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's building the future of digital in messaging, and every single person has a different experience. I think what people don't understand about messaging and automation specifically is everyone's been saying personalization and all these kind of buzzwords for the last 20 years, right? But you look at like why they say it and what is underneath it. And what I see is web and apps and basically technology. You took the whole company, so take the whole company of Best Buy or the whole company of Aramark or whatever, and you push it on the web. And then you want it to serve everyone. So you say, here's everything we do so that everyone can buy from us.
Right.
Right. And that's like the model that worked. And that's why you ended up with a ton of stuff online. And then now personalization, trying to get like back to showing you the item at the right time. It flips because in messaging, it starts with what do you want? And you say, I want a Bud Light. Cool. Here's a Bud Light. It's $9. Apple Pay. Done. Would you like to order another Bud Light? My experience that I just had in that entire interaction is completely different than the person next to me. So in a goal of just order beer, every single person has a different experience. And I think that's what's fundamentally different. And people, it takes a little bit to grasp of how to design that and power that and plug into the right systems. But once you get it there, it's not bad. It's just an infinite feedback loop and you're learning at an aggregate level, what are people asking for that we don't do? And that's the key insight. The greatest difference of this space is the past of digital was webs, click charts, heat maps, and flows, but it was everything you wanted to do. It was the brand and people in a room and UX designers, everyone argued about what they thought was right. And then they used a heat map or a flow chart to validate that they were kind of right. But you're never fully right. You can never hear the customer. But now what you have is machine readable text from every single person at an aggregate level telling you what they want. And when you fail over, you say, hey, we don't do that yet. You asked for a jersey. The jersey stand is actually behind section 216. But in the engine, what we're doing is flagging jersey with the number 1. And if jersey shows up 219 times, then we're going to say, hey, why don't we build a jersey flow? And now the errors, the things that aren't working, become the intelligence because you can hear. And that's what's fundamentally different. And what it actually is kind of complex is it's like this infinite feedback loop of improvement. And you kind of have to like rethink how you think of digital. Today, everyone thinks they have the answers and they go optimize it. In this one, you have to actually just act like you don't know anything, which is kind of true, and listen. And then the ability to adapt and have empathy for the errors and understand where to go is actually a much more powerful way to serve your customers. But the experience at the Philly Stadium was amazing. And, it took a while to build and because it was new. I mean, it was like the first time ever on Apple to see anything like that with Apple Pay built into their POS systems. But the feedback was amazing. The best CSAT you've ever seen. And the simplicity of it to get it to that, simple to just say 2 Bud Lights is an Apple Pay button. And then the reorder just has the Apple Pay connected to it. And I can just literally not type again.
Right.
No sign up, no passwords. The QR code's in the back of the seat. The camera now recognizes that on the iPhone. When you see friction like that reduced so much, you go from like 5 minutes to download an app and find the ordering system inside of some stadium app that no one ever wants to download and can't even get service in the stadium to actually get the damn thing on their phone anyways, to create an account where they forget the password that you don't even fucking know, to like I scan a code and there's a Bud Light and I just say I want a Bud Light and then an Apple Pay shows up and then someone delivers my beer. Like it was an amazing moment of this is the future of technology. And when I saw it, I was like, this is it. And the next 5 to 7 years for me, it's like just driving that train. I mean, it's one of those moments when you see something like that where it feels like the App Store. It feels like, okay, this is the next interface, messaging or voice. If I could just say, hey, Bud Light to Google Assistant, and it shows up, you're like, whoa. But there's a lot of systems to be connected. There's a lot of use cases to be perfected. I think those are the best though. High utility, low friction use cases for things that like a whole app doesn't make sense, or downloading it for this one time doesn't make sense. Those are like really, really powerful use cases.
Yeah, no, I think the thing that you're saying is it sounds to me that sort of the traditional relationship between consumers and brands from a traditional technology perspective, it sounds like, the complexity was typically put on the end consumer. right? Like here's a
Yeah,
website, here's a mobile app, go figure that stuff out. But it's almost like that's getting flipped on its head. Whereas with sort of conversational interfaces, right, that complexity is sort of abstracted to a certain degree where it's like, okay, well, what do you guys want to do? Right. Would you say that's sort of fair
exactly.
to think about? Okay.
I mean, you take what the company does and you push it everywhere,
Yeah.
right? So you take the company and you push it to email, push it to web, push it, and you're just pushing it out. And in this model, you flip it and you're pushing it into one channel based on what the customer is calling for. And the hard part about it is that all of these departments that don't really talk to each other are now starting to like figure out they have to talk to each other. And that's the real game everyone's playing here. And that's
Yeah.
why we actually, having the end-to-end solution with the agent and the bots coming together with, Conversocial, now we can bring together marketing, sales, and care.
Yeah.
And that's a big hurdle though. I mean, you need the chief customer officer to become a thing, and that's becoming a thing now. And then those departments have to get aligned. And now, with some of the partners we work with, they have a conversation team that's made up of these different kind of skill sets that used to see themselves as VP digital, VP marketing, head of social care, head of call center. But now they all have to work together to say, okay, what if we had a one kind of CRM record, one conversation platform that it was how we talked to all of our customers, but it had to pull in the booking experience when it came from VP digital, and that person's working on an experience. The VP of marketing is doing the outbound kind of notifications and triggers, while the care person's doing all the things with the agents and routing and, agent assistance and escalation, all that. That's what's happening. And all these things are in one channel working together. And if it doesn't get solved, we're going to end up with like the do not reply email again.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that happened because these departments didn't talk together, and like email, you could just kind of like get away with it. So we ended up with these very like disconnected systems. But now it's coming into one channel, and I believe it's going to be like you talk to Sephora however you want. WhatsApp, iMessage, Messenger, Alexa, Google Assistant, doesn't matter. And Sephora needs to know what you want and be able to bring it to you. And that I think it'll be a much easier, simpler future for consumers, but it's going to be a shift for brands for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You touched on sort of the issues internally in companies. So I definitely want to talk about that a little bit later. But first, I want to sort of dig into my next question was going to be, how do you look at chatbots and what's their current value? And you sort of alluded to that, talking about that errors are the intelligence. Also, I've also heard you say something about, relationships today, provided the prospect of chatbots are the real value differential. The relationships and just like the nature of having sort of a persistent channel is not necessarily something we've had in the past. So can you talk a little bit more about that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with the relationship side. That's how I see the whole space. Is our goal is how do you create great relationships with customers? That's what people want to do.
Yeah.
And we think it's the relationship design, and it's something that we work on and we talk about internally. And relationships in the simplest way are basically what you understand and what you remember.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what I understand about you is we met, you were talking, you were passionate, we had a friend in common, you asked me to do this. And I remembered, okay, Alex, podcast, thanks. Okay, we have a friendship. That's more of an acquaintanceship because it's new. We don't really know that much about each other, but I know enough. And I remember that. And the more I remember over time, the better the relationship. And that's how we think about designing automation. And it's like what you understand is natural language, what you remember is CRM. But the way to do it in a conversational context that's always dynamic, I think we call it a customer relationship builder, not a customer relationship manager.
Yeah.
And I think that's the new product to be built that we really spend a lot of time on our customer profiles working on. And it's just about those two things. And when you come back, I remember what you wanted. I remember your context, and then I can start being proactive. And I think the future is anticipation, not just automation. And that's where great relationships happen. That's when you say, thank you. It reaches out to me. Would you like to do this again? I know that you would probably want this. I'm like, thanks. And, the metric for all brands in the future should be how many times people say thanks.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's the goal here. And what's funny is people argue with me all the time about like automation and bots. No one's to talk
Right.
to robots. There's so many studies since like the 80s, 70s even. Robert always sends me. People prefer automation if done well over human contact every time. If done well. the thing that people look at is like IVR and phone trees and the interface of phone even and calling and dialing. And when you start, I think of like friction in the craziest micro ways. I'm like, I have to remember the number. The numbers on a keyboard now that doesn't have letters. So even calling flowers is hard
Yeah.
because I'm like FL. I can't even see the letters anymore. They're all tiny. And then you're like the ring, and you're like the ringtone, and then you're like the IVR, and then you get to that, and then you're punch more numbers, and I have to click on the numbers keypad again on my phone because I'm already on a different app because I'm distracted. I'm all over the place. And then I'm like, fuck, what did number 2 just say? And then I get to the end of it, and I'm like, fuck, replay it. Play it again. I forgot what even category I wanted. Play it again, click number 2. And you think of this like that is insane, but we don't even think about it. But when you look at the other platforms, when you reduce friction that much, like things happen. And so, when I really think about it, the way relationships happen between friends is in messaging. I know when you're typing, I know that you read it. All these little nuances have made it an effective medium to like keep up with people you care about. And, Robert has a story. His grandma was like, just please don't call me. Like, it's much easier to text me. Thank you. From his like 84-year-old grandmother. And people, CMOs will argue with me like it's a generational thing. And I'm like, fuck off. How many times do you text people every day? Do you call or text more? Like it's kind of like everyone. It's just one of those things where as humans, we're like, all right, less friction. It's easier. It's simpler. And whether or not it's a bot or not, it's just, is it instant and is it right?
Yeah.
It's accuracy, then speed. Speed is very important though, but it needs to be accurate. And if it is, the moment chatbots work and you didn't expect it to work because you've been going through these IVR phone trees that always end in a human, it's mind blowing. And I think the thing to think about are use cases that you can fully automate, because the thing we learned about consumer behavior, and something I'd share, is the expectation that this is going to end in a human. People hate automation. They just get me past this automation because I have to talk to a human anyways.
Yeah.
If I know or believe it can be fully automated, give me the automation.
Mm-hmm.
And if it works, I never want the human.
Right.
And that's what we're all going through because people don't see a lot of great automation. They think of the phone and they think of these phone trees and they think of like scripts. They don't understand you. And it's not the game. It's like, it's not the thing, but you're starting to see it. I mean, you're starting to see use cases and CSATs and experiences where the people are like, that's amazing. That was simple. That was fast. Let's do that. And I think with that relationship, whether it's a human or a bot, I think messaging is the best interface for it. And you can build a really, really great experience that remembers things that can be the automation responding, or it can pass that context over to the agents so that they also know all of your past stuff as well. And
yeah,
that's to be honest, it seems so simple to me. And it's getting there now where it's obvious that the way you interact with your friends is how you're going to interact with brands.
yeah.
And great brands have to become like great friends. And I think that is a huge shift that's happening. And the thing that is honestly the hardest thing is they have to change how they view the world and their own cultural DNA.
Mm-hmm.
Like no one wants to be spammed or send a message. I will block you. If I have shitty friends that put me in a group chat, I will block you. Like that's what's happening.
Yeah.
And for brands to think of themselves as like, how do I just be helpful? How do I, just ask you how your day is? How do I tell you something about a wellness program? Because I saw that you were talking about that and you'd ask about health products before. And how do you just care? And I think brands, that's the hard part. I don't think it's a technology problem we're going through. I think the medium is so intimate and personal that you have to give a shit.
Yeah, you raised a really interesting point too about anticipation, because it seems to me that, today you're right. It's like chatbots aren't to the level where we can talk to it about anything and it can easily handle everything. And, it works really good, right? We have to play towards the limitations today. And it seems to me that most vendors or a lot of vendors out there look at it in regards to the messaging channel as being persistent plus automation equals a good experience. But what you're saying is persistence plus anticipation equals a really good experience. And to sort of fundamentally understand the differences between those two things has the potential to make really good experiences that are maybe compartmentalized versus trying to shove an entire website into a chatbot or voice experience.
Exactly. And I think it's a key thing to think about as you're thinking about what use case or how to design it. Um, and I think a way to think about anticipation is, do you think when you do this, when you create this and you anticipate something, will people say thank you?
Yeah.
And if you use that as your guiding light, if your metric internally is thanks because they can text back thanks, then I think you can build some good shit. And if you don't, and they're going to say, not that helpful, really don't want to hear from you. Why are you messaging me? If that is what you're doing and that's what you think they'll respond with, and you'll know because they'll tell you, then, it's probably not the right time to send them a message.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I actually heard the same exact thing from a guy named Wolf Paulus. I think he was actually speaking at the Business of Bots Summit that you were at as well. And I think he works at Intuit. And he was saying the exact same thing, is that the metric for evaluating good conversational experiences is how many times people say thank you.
It's
So
great.
I think it's interesting to sort of begin to see some of these metrics emerge, just from sort of looking at the complexities between how do we take sort of a platform that's built on sort of programming language that's very logical, and then sort of align that to something like linguistics, where sometimes it's nonlinear, and be able to extract some sort of new metric out of that. I think is really interesting just through the evolution of how this is all sort of taking place. But that being said, sort of switching gears a little bit. So we talked about, where do you sort of see current value as far as chatbots? And what are sort of the primary benefits, whether it's sort of the relationship or anticipation versus automation, or the errors or the intelligence. So for like an enterprise company, how should they be even thinking about what is a conversational strategy? Like what does that even mean today within context? Because we see a lot of point solutions, but I think we're finally getting to a point where we're thinking about things in a more comprehensive perspective. So what does that actually mean to you?
It's a good question. And I think everyone has a different, stairway
Sure.
or evolution of what they're going through. But I think, take a level up. What's happening is marketing, sales, and care are converging onto one channel,
Hmm.
right? So everything's converging to this one space that used to be dominated mostly by care and agents. But even that shift is still new, right? Going from phone and live chat where nothing's persistent to asynchronous, or voice platforms are synchronous, but mostly messaging, to asynchronous platforms that are persistent, that last forever, and have a connection, is a different shift, right? And the way that we're thinking about it really is, step one, get on a platform that is messaging first, right? Live chat platforms and email platforms trying to move into messaging and still do this session based shit, it's not the game. Like, it's not going to work. You're going to do these mediocre things. There's infinite use cases and screenshots that I've tweeted of interacting with a brand, and they say, hey, I'm going to let you know I'm going to go on lunch right now. I'll be back in 30 minutes, because they're thinking in a live chat world. They're
Yeah.
thinking in this, like, I have an open session with you. It's going to close. Like, all that is like the past. This is a world where it's on your time, the consumer. Your brand should respond instantly in an asynchronous world. Like, they should respond real time, show the typing indicator, whatever. But there's no idea of like this going on break. It's just passing between agents and stuff. So the first thing is get on a real messaging platform. The second thing is just start with automation around one use case,
Hmm.
whether it's care, marketing, anything, and find an intent. You have all your top intents already from the care platforms, and just start chipping away at um, the intents that you think have, low friction, high utility. And all of a sudden you'll start seeing the metrics shifting for those intents to get, whether it's better agent productivity or it's fully resolved by the bot, and just keep chipping away. But you have to understand that you need to start with automation now, and start small, and always have a human too. And so it's not throw an AI bot out, let's do magic. It's have the messaging be the core channel, and start doing 3% at one intent of automation, and then do 6, and then do 11, and then do 14. And then you start to realize the muscles needed to, like, oh, I need like a business analyst to really understand this. I need a product type person to really build out more experiences. And then I need the care team to get the context from the bot more efficiently, so that they always have the last stuff from them. And you start like going through these cycles of like what that is. And then you think about building a conversation team, which I think is the end goal of all this. Is the most consumer interactions will happen via messaging, and that team will include digital people, care people, as well as kind of marketing teams. Um, and so, and I don't think what channel matters. Brands are always kind of like, I just want to be wherever my customer are. Like that's what
Yeah.
people say. Like they'll
Yeah.
always kind of say the same terms.
Right.
And you're going to have Apple and WhatsApp and Facebook and all of them pushing really hard. So that's why we have a platform where you can copy and paste experiences between all of them. I do think focusing on a couple platforms that really has good experience and customer demand, and then promoting that platform. As everyone's going private and encrypted and everyone's driving down that train, we can now do end-to-end resolution in the messaging channels. And I think that's the biggest shift, is
Yeah.
being able to actually resolve things, which social never got to.
Yeah.
And that's a big vision we have, is it all can be done via messaging, because the APIs, the data, the account linking, all that stuff's there. Whereas in the past, it was like the social escalation would go to the call center because the people on social couldn't share private data. And that's getting solved by the platforms. And I believe they're going to really help drive that train. And once that happens, that'll be the fundamental, I think, platform shift that allows everything to happen on messaging. You need the account linking, you need the privacy, you need the security. Apple made a big announcement yesterday. They're going to start driving all of the phone calls for businesses that have Apple Business Chat. They're going to ask the person if they would rather message you before they even call you. And you're seeing shifts like that happen. You're like, oh, okay, this is going to shift. This is going to shift the market. And I think just get started with the agent piece, doing real messaging, like asynchronous experiences, and then always have an automation experience. Just keep building on it from zero. Start small and then go backwards, instead of starting like with some AI bot. And then the marketing team can do campaigns and stuff. The coolest thing about messaging is every entry point is a different experience. And so, if you're Tostitos, so we did things last year and they had a QR code on every chip bag and it linked to the Tostitos channel. That experience to get that coupon code, which performed insanely well, is like 75,000 bags. A third of people scanned the code and 95% of people actually redeemed it. It was like, it worked. No one else who came in the Tostitos channel organically ever sees this experience. And so it's a way that teams can work together and experiment on things while their core channel can just be, the care piece as well. And I think that's powerful. You can have, 3 different kind of campaigns or teams working together to try to create great experiences.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point, because it's almost
like I
like,
would have said a year ago. So
yeah. Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. So something interesting, I've been wondering about, because a lot of these companies, larger, Fortune 500, Fortune 50, have gone through these AI transformations. Do you find that companies that have sort of an AI transformation architecture are sort of better at aligning their teams internally around maybe a conversational AI experience? Or do you think, all companies are sort of struggling with the same thing when it comes to sort of organizing their teams to best support a conversational AI project?
it's a good question. I'll give you an honest answer. No.
Yeah,
AI is the problem. AI is like saying the internet.
sure.
It's like saying mobile.
Yeah,
And so what you have right now is no one fucking knows what AI means,
yeah,
because it means everything,
right.
right? So there's AI on top of the data. If I meet like an AI consultant team, it takes us 2 fucking hours to realize that we have no idea what each other do, and we actually do nothing even close to the same thing.
Right.
They're like doing AI predictive models on top of a database to find errors in the like H column if there's ever like an account security hack. And they're
Sure.
like, we're an AI conversations platform. And
Yeah.
like, what? So we don't. Everyone has one of these in corporate,
Yeah.
and that's what these kind of companies do.
Right.
The people we find a lot of success with are the people who actually own a core business line, and they can drive the experience like they drove mobile. So Sephora, it's the head of digital, right? Who used to own the mobile app. Now their job title is going from the mobile head of digital to the messaging head of digital. And we're taking all the APIs from the mobile app and we're picking one or two use cases to focus on, to blow it out of the water, to have a new KPI, which was, hey, ad goes to mobile app and web, ad goes to messaging. 60% increase on messaging. Okay, let's move all traffic to messaging. Okay, now I'm going to change my job title because we proved it, we hit it. People internally get it. People are using the experience. It's good. No one talked about AI.
Yeah.
It's people have the job skills to do product or understand marketing or like what their metric is. And we can beat that metric because messaging is just a simpler interface that has tons of benefits that just come out of the box. There's no passwords. There's no login. There's no signups. There's no forms. You can deep link into it from anywhere. It remembers your last stuff. Your calls are always finally recorded for quality purposes. Like it has all these benefits as a medium. And that's why it works, because it's just a more effective medium for certain things. But that person we find is like the person who really can get things done. The VP of digital at 1-800-Flowers, the VP of digital at Sephora, you know, the head of like CRM marketing at Fandango. And usually it's not some AI role, because that person's usually like the innovation guy. It's like me. I have a fucking bullshit title, right? It's like chief automation officer. It's like, no, I'm focused on mostly now like partnerships and working with all the platforms.
Yeah.
I came from the automation platform. And also when you're a CEO getting acquired into a company, it's like, what are you doing? And like, where do you want to fit? And, you know, so it would be like that title. I don't feel like gets a lot done.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No.
If that's like your title, you're like always the new, kind of thinking about all the new things, and you're the AI person, and then people are everywhere and people don't really know what it means because you're not actually responsible for any actual, you know, KPI or metric in the company. And the digital person's already stressed out with the mobile app and making sure the website doesn't fucking go down. They don't want a new project, but making the VP of digital or the CDO, making them the AI person is the secret. So you make them the AI person by really nailing an experience that becomes the person good at AI. Here's how it works out. The people in 2010, I remember it distinctly, you know, it was like everyone became like mobile. And no one really knew what to do on mobile. We were just like, it's all about mobile. And you watched everyone kind of freak out. The people who became great at mobile nailed the use cases for mobile. So the guy I worked with at MGM, Kelly Smith, he was the CDO. He was the SVP of all mobile and payments for Starbucks. He nailed mobile. Ordering coffee via mobile app ended up being one of the greatest use cases for mobile. He became one of the people that are the smartest people in mobile. Same with like an Uber app. They became the smartest in mobile because it was built mobile first with GPS. All these things had to come together. That became what's great at mobile. It's a use case game. And so I think when you think about AI, like just stop saying AI and say like, what is the use case that in a conversational interface can be a much greater experience that people will love? When you nail that, that is the moment when, oh, these people say to me all the time, man, you guys are great at AI. You know, we don't even talk about AI. AI is, I get it. I believe in it. Trust me. I spend all my days thinking about it. But the way I think to become smart at something is to nail a use case underneath the umbrella that is something. So that makes it easier to understand. Internally, people can grasp it. It's comparing things to the past. So it's easy for them to be like, okay, that's like bookings on a website, but kind of easier. Oh, that makes sense. And then you're using AI elements for conversational design, which is different than using AI for our, you know, back of house AI systems or whatever. So AI is a term, as you know, it's every 5 years, it's like a buzzword fucking jar. And
Yeah.
everyone kind of spins. So, but
No,
everyone, it confuses people because it's too big. It's like saying, you know, we're building an internet company.
right. Yeah. The only reason I bring it up is because it's almost as though that there are specific best practices around implementing these quote unquote AI solutions that seem sort of analogous across different use cases. It seems, you know, in every use case, it's like start with a pilot, use that to gain traction. And, you know, I think sometimes when some of these brands don't understand that, they may go sort of too deep investing into some sort of vendor solution that is supposedly going to do all these things under the sun, but doesn't do any of them well. So it's just interesting to sort of see, you know, people talking about sort of a broader AI architecture and strategy, but it not really working out in practice, and then seeing things that are more compartmentalized like conversational AI succeeding very well if people sort of take similar approaches, at sort of a strategic level. It's just something interesting I had noticed. But I guess back to what you were mentioning about, just the teams and sort of bringing those things together. It's interesting because we were just talking about, sort of the paradigm shift where, the relationship between consumers and brands is changing from the complexity moving from the onus being on the consumer to the onus being on the company at this point. And it's interesting to see that because internally, it's almost like a lot of these different departments were sort of pushing a lot of these things out. And now they have to be organized. So it's sort of more of a pull system. And it's like these different, departments internally have to talk together and sort of figure out what is that new workflow that they can sort of establish between different departments. So like when you have sort of seen this landscape play out internally in companies, like are there any best practices that you would suggest to companies like trying to sort of do this? Or because so I'll give you an example. I was talking to the head of AI of a quite large bank a couple of days ago, and they were telling me that they had implemented all these conversational AI solutions, and they're actually one of the leaders in the space when I look at banks. But for him, they had only recently begun to build out a conversational design team, right? So I'm curious, just from a structural standpoint, like what have you seen are best practices in regards to not only pulling together the traditional business units internally of marketing and customer care and things of that nature, but how do you also build sort of chatbot specific teams? Or maybe that's just a function of time and more enablement in these companies, but just curious from your perspective.
It's a good question. And we see it in many different ways because companies are designed very differently. If you have C-level buy-in, then you have an opportunity within an organization for everyone to make a career move, right? When the CEO of 1-800-Flowers gets on stage and says the future of our company is messaging and voice automation, it's very easy to find the ambitious people internally to align and really want to go build that future.
Right.
Versus in another organization, it's like, what's this chatbot thing in the corner that someone's working on? Right. And no one wants to go like bet their career on that. And so I think you find very different ones, but from a tactical level, start with the chatbot side. And I believe automation will lead the way. Like everything will start with intent.
Mm-hmm.
And then whether or not you need automation or an agent is because of the intent platform. So what was the assist platform, which now is the bot platform at Conversocial, is kind of the thing that leads the way. And to do that effectively, I think you need someone who, really understands product management, because building these experiences is product and it is design and it does have integrations and flows. And, you have to like think about the customer experience. And then you need some kind of like marketing / copywriter, because someone needs to have the brand voice and tone. And then you need some kind of like analyst type business person, because every day is more insights to glean from, looking at all of this data that you're getting from people talking to you. And then the last one is over time, having your own JSON engineer to do integrations to more APIs. And that allows you to do a lot, like a ton. You can do that with one person actually. The product person could write the copy to start and it's fine. But that's what like a conversation team looks like. And then what platform doesn't matter, because Apple Business Chat and Messenger and all of them are abstracted into like a platform like ours to one platform, right? And then when, based on intent, we go to an agent, is just making sure that team, the head of care, who we need to route messages to, in that conversation team are really connected. And what it allows is the conversation team can keep building things, new experiences, new things. And whenever we know we need to go to agent, we're always at the routing to get there. And that team just needs to really work together to understand that we're trying to make them more efficient always. And we're always trying to do things without having to, pass it over there, because it's new experiences that are new digital things that we couldn't even do before on this platform. And I think that's kind of how it works. I mean, the hardest part is not the design of the team. It's the ego of corporate, right? The hardest part is everyone protecting their job and not wanting to make these merge together because it might not be beneficial to their selfish interest, right? All of a sudden it feels like both people are kind of stealing each other's jobs.
Right.
Right. And I think that's the thing. So what you need is, a really like empathy driven organization and from the leadership down to say like, this is about a single customer experience that brings our whole company to it.
Yeah.
How are we serving that? You know, if I was going to be the CEO of some big corporation, I think you'd have to really rethink how you've designed the org and how you speak and how you use your language to get people on that train. That's the hardest part, I think. The hardest part's not knowing the right people to be in the roles. The hardest part is knowing how to motivate people to not be self-interested, and maybe the power is going to shift between all these because the consumer is going to decide what they want, and maybe it's
Yeah.
not my org.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, right? So once you have like the team, and once you can sort of address the issues of sort of ego and people trying to one up each other in an organization, right? The next component to me would seem to be, okay, well, what is that sort of platform that's going to best be able to support, that life cycle? So in your opinion, like what are the core components necessary in an enterprise grade solution? And once we start talking about that, I also want to talk about sort of the specific components, because I know you guys had developed RAN to sort of manage dialogue. But from your perspective, what are those components that are most necessary in a platform?
Uh, I mean, there's all the standard stuff. Like
Yeah.
being an enterprise grade solution requires all of the, privacy and security stuff. So being up to date on all of that and being the best in class at that is something that we've taken very seriously. We've, had almost like perfect uptime since start, and we, first to be like GDPR compliant, like all that kind of stuff. You just have to always be on top of that, and have like also InfoSec back you and do all these types of things. From just a kind of in practice type thinking,
Hmm.
this space is lending itself to collect a lot of information
Yeah.
because people are telling you everything, all of their thoughts, right? And so you need to really, take that seriously, as well as you have to think about the design. I think the more important thing about this space to be enterprise level is helping the brands not mess up. And what
Hmm.
I mean by that is the minute you say the wrong thing in an automated way, you're a PR story.
Yeah.
And so I could say enterprise grade and all these things we do to make us enterprise level, but like we didn't have a problem with that. That's just going through the motions and all the years and, paying for the different E&O insurance and D&O, all
Right.
the things that make you an enterprise platform and the contracts and all that. But I think a bigger thing is how do you help enterprises not shoot themselves in the foot,
Yeah.
and helping them as a platform level, uh, not responding when they might not know the answer, or learning and training itself in the wrong way that starts responding on behalf of the brand, but it's wrong and then people hate it, or it says something kind of racist, or these things can happen, which could be very detrimental to the brand. And when you think about putting words in a brand's mouth that are automatic, I think you have to do extra levels. So we spent a lot of time thinking about how to make the writing tools in the platform and the errors kind of assistant to let you know that there might not be the best thing, or this thing might respond the wrong way, and this percentage of the way it responds actually doesn't seem like that's a good idea. Like I think that's a lot of the things that will help big brands at scale not trip up, because this space, you don't know what it's going to respond.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a huge freak out. That scares brands. So I think to help big brands in that way is a different way to answer the question without just a typical, like, we have to be enterprise grade, which everyone
Right.
wants.
Right. Yeah, so that makes a ton of sense, right? It's not just about, being enterprise grade, but obviously, privacy and security, are all, top of mind, right? But it's more so about, the strategy and best practices that, a vendor can provide, as far as, hey, you probably don't want to do that here, but you should do this here, is, almost invaluable in this space that, really has only been around for maybe 4 or 5 years from like a, awareness perspective. But that being said, I think there are specific differentials within the enterprise platforms that I've seen. and I'm just curious to get your perspective on them. So the first one I've seen, obviously is the strategy and the expertise and the experience, which we just talked about. The second thing is having some sort of differentiated core chatbot offering, right? So between natural language processing and dialogue management, I think there are a lot of platforms today that are just following the trend and they're not very differentiated. So that's why, with your platform, I really like the fact that you guys had accounted for, that sort of differential with the dialogue management when it came to sort of random access navigation. I thought that was something that I had not seen from many other chatbot platforms. So curious to get your perspective on that. And then as a follow-up question, also, the other thing that I see that's differentiated is the companies that are really building out that middleware component. And you alluded to it several times during this conversation, whether that's sort of version control or, functional testing or, analytics getting integrated into that to really provide, a full enterprise package that can support the entire life cycle. Those are sort of the places that I've seen differentiation. Curious to get your thoughts on sort of the dialogue, and then also if you have any additional thoughts around, what really differentiates these platforms from each other.
For sure. And I mean, a lot of us compete in all of the same RFPs all the time.
Sure.
So, it's like everyone's always trying to find the one feature that no one else has. I have a hard time looking at competitors though, and trying to copy them and shit.
Sure.
And so we always just thought about it from how do you create an experience that is non-linear so the customer can be fully in control and they can change their mind at any time. And we can also have memory always.
Yeah.
And that's what we call random access nav, just because, that's what we named it, whatever. But the way we looked at the world was when I used all these platforms, they think of the world as a line. We think of the world as a circle. And they have a line, which is a goal. And the line is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? And I'm going to go through this line and I'm going to get to G because that is the goal that the consumer wants to do. And if you do that, you write copy for the line, you write copy for the next step, and you write copy for what you want to know. And you do all these things. And then as your platform evolves, that's kind of your philosophy on how you build conversations. And it still feels like web and apps. You're telling someone where to go, and you're the one that decides and thinks you know the best path. Versus if you think of it as a line, you say, okay, the goal is G. And we need A, B, C, D, E, F to get there, but we don't care how we get there or in what order. And so as a circle, we have all these letters in there, and you're basically trying to check off all the letters so that you can complete the goal. And you don't write copy for what you know, you write copy for what you don't know. You're writing all the copy actually for all the things that you need to know that you still don't know. And you're also able to skip multiple steps. If I said 3 entities in one sentence, we just like check, 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 go to the next check. And if I updated location, but I'm at the class step, we're like, okay, that's a location, not a class. Just update location and move forward. Now we go back to class. And there's no idea of a line. There's just ideas of a goal. And I think that philosophy led us to build something that fundamentally feels very different than anything else. And that also, I think, allowed us to knock numbers out of the park like Sephora and Flowers and stuff that, were the keynote stories, because they were the ones that the customer was making a 12-step flow into a 3-step flow.
Right.
The reminder allowed them to change it without like getting an email to go to a website to like change the time of my class because I couldn't go. You just respond back like, I can't go today. Can I go Monday? And you're doing these kinds of designs. And that's really where I think just by, thinking a little differently, you're able to build something that now as a platform level to do that, it's fundamentally core to everything we do. How you enter into a flow. Do you bring in context? Can you delete context? Like how the map auto creates in real time. So a 5-step flow actually based on whatever you type rebuilds the flow in real time. Yeah. And so you're not designing anything. As a brand, all you're doing is thinking of the goal. The customer is then teaching you how to get there. And you can pick the 5 things. You need to like pick the first path, right? But the path is able to rebuild itself in real time. And that kind of changes everything, to be honest. And even building that where it's so cool, we have this big dashboard where you type in like, can I book a hotel in 2 nights in New York? And you see the Hyatt booking flow rebuild itself in real time.
Yeah.
And when you see that, it's cool. You're like, okay, I understand what's happening here. It's very complex, but like that ability to do that, just the product looks really different than someone who's building for a line.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think those type of innovations and sort of outside of the box thinking, they are the components that are getting us closer to whatever that idealistic view of communicating with a computer system actually is, right? I don't think it's, using web views or buttons. I think they certainly have their place, but it's almost like, are you going to pigeonhole yourself with an experience by saying, well, AI and nothing in AI is good enough now, so we should just sort of stick to just using buttons when in fact maybe there's just a different way we need to be looking about this thing in the first place, right? So yeah, that's what really caught my eye with your platform, which I thought was really cool. That being said, sort of maybe a good segue is we talked a lot about you know different platforms and strategies and things of that nature, and I want to sort of take it to the next level of when you look out across the ecosystem, what do you think people are thinking about that's just wrong? Or maybe a better way to put it is, what important truths do very few people agree with you on in this space? And I think we probably talked about a couple of them, but just curious if there are any other ones that you want to mention.
That's a good question. Um, it's always trying to think of what I can say and what I can't say, and how
Yeah,
to not
fair
piss
enough.
anyone off. Because I have some pretty strong held views that might not be appropriate to share.
For sure.
Uh, let me think. The first thing I would say is everyone kind of arguing what is care and what is marketing and what is sales, because it comes from such a historic point of view. I think the greatest marketing is great service.
Yeah.
Um, but great service will look like great marketing.
Hmm.
And in the future, it's indistinguishable what is marketing and what is service. And that, I think, is what messaging lends itself well to. But most people wouldn't, I don't think, agree with that. They very much see them differently. But I don't see them at all differently. I think the right time to follow up and the right time to be helpful and the right time to answer questions for you are all the same. They've just been in different silos. And with messaging, when you can always reach someone, everything becomes about being helpful and being service. Because I don't need to reach you again. Like, marketing fundamentally changes if I can always talk to you. And that's not how it works today. It's always a go find them again type game. And so that would lead me into my second point, which is, this is a bigger philosophical view. I don't even know if this is right or wrong. I'm going to answer your question, but it's more of how I see the world and kind of what's actually happening here. And I think what's happening is the brands in the future are not about what they do. Brands are about how they treat you. And this is a huge fundamental shift, because what I think happened is no one's realized it yet. But in the last 10 years, Apple and Google convinced everyone in the world to build applications. What you did when you build an application is you've exposed your APIs to everyone in the world. Now that your APIs are exposed, your service is kind of white labeled, even for yourself. And if, everything's an API, then the fastest, most frictionless experience will win. It's how all the booking sites won over the hotels. It's how all the internet things, became the middle players with the Yelps and the open tables and all those things. Cause like it was hard to, use these experiences. So because all those time slots and that inventory and those APIs are opened up, this middle land kind of played out. So like, if anyone right now is thinking, am I a hotel chain and I sell hotel rooms? I don't think that's the business you're in anymore. I actually think that if you sell hotel rooms and you're trying to sell it yourself, you're probably fucked, because inventory of all of the services of almost everything in the world are exposed via APIs. And that can go almost up to like, hey Siri, I just want to get a haircut. And once we get to an intent level world, I don't care where that comes from. Siri is going to decide. Like my bot will decide. What this means though, is if a brand today thinks of themselves as a cube that does 6 things, like book hotel rooms, sell food, in-room dining, in the future, what you do is you have to expand that cube to build relationships that emotionally impact people. And you become how you make people feel, not what you sell or do. And so all of a sudden you're a 27-sided cube, because when someone asks you, hey, do you have a daycare recommendation for my kids? I'm like stressed out and I got to work and I'm staying at a Hyatt hotel. You're like, yeah, totally. Here's the best daycare nearby. Also, here's another recommendation for your kids. Here's some health food products for kids. Is there anything else we can help you with? Like, yeah. And you keep asking the questions. Some things, imagine someone said like, hey, can you teach me how to play the mandolin? And like, well, we don't do that yet. We're a hotel chain, but we'll let you know if we ever do. And then 9 months from now, they do specialized music classes or yoga training in hotels. And they're like, hey, just want to let you know that based on a bunch of people asking for it, and this never ending relationship becomes the thing that people value. And that's why I love Hyatt or love a hotel chain or love any other brand, is how they make me feel and add value to my life. Has nothing to do with what they sell. I think we've already seen it with Amazon. They've kind of done it, but at a super next level, when it's an intent-based world, when every API is exposed, I can get any service I want instantly. Therefore, brands have a whole different purpose in the world. That, I believe, is going to play out in the best medium, which is probably where you build relationships and have a persistent kind of relationship that lasts forever. And that's why I actually am most excited about messaging. But I don't think I don't talk to a lot of people that have, they're either like really, they're like that, whatever doesn't happen, or kind of, it's too like utopian of a view or dystopian, either way you want to take it.
No, I actually agree quite a bit with what you said, because it's really interesting, because it's almost like the degree of value and service was a cyclical thing. Because if we think about, companies like, I don't know, like 40, 50 years ago, right? You go to your barber and you have a relationship with them. You go to a department store, you have a real relationship with them. And if you look at like companies like Nordstrom, that really sort of underpins their value proposition. But then you had the prospect of technology, and it was almost like the scalability of sort of marketing and all these things was more important. So then you started to see like a lack of service and sort of, quality of service being something that a lot of these companies had as a differential, because they focus more on the technology to scale. But it's almost like we're coming full circle now, where technology can almost give us the capability to have stronger relationships with these brands. So it's interesting just to look at it from like a cyclical perspective to a certain extent, but very fascinating viewpoint.
It's kind of the future. If you think about your brand expanding this cube to 27 sides, and when we were talking about the errors or the intelligence, all of a sudden you just listen, adapt, and then, decide if you want to respond and make that another thing you do. And no longer do you have to figure out what to do. Your customers tell you what you want to do. And based on what the conversations you're having, you're able to either adapt and add new services or decide not to do it. I mean, an example Robert always told me is when he was a CTO of Best Buy, he couldn't hear anyone in the stores, right? 150,000 people a day are having conversations. He had no idea what they were saying. So he let everyone on the job use their personal devices. And then he installed a private Google server for all of Best Buy. And he said, use the devices. If you don't know, say, I will find out. And just search. Like, you don't have to have the answers. Just say you don't know and say, I will find out. It's on the back of every Geek Squad uniform. And what he got was all of a sudden, all the searches were the insights.
Interesting.
And that is what led to even us building this company. Is like, this is on a whole nother level. You talk about the insights you can get if you can understand every conversation happening, you know everything. And in a Vegas store, he kept getting these searches for yoga mats. And he was like, why is everyone searching for yoga mats? And he couldn't figure it out. And he's like, I have no idea. I said, why would we don't even sell yoga mats? And it turned out the department was selling Nintendo Wii's. And the Nintendo Wii's were kind of causing a lot of damage at home because they were slipping all over and people were falling. So the people there realized they could sell yoga mats and like have a secondary side business, hawking yoga mats off the internet to deliver to people and then charge them in the store. And he's an entrepreneur. Robert was like, that's great. I mean, it's not really illegal, but it's kind of like, that's an amazing insight that I learned, that why don't we sell yoga mats? Why don't we actually expand into this? Why don't we make our own floor mats? Why don't we you can make all the secondary things for things that we're already selling. And it's insights like that I think you're using the medium to understand and learn on what you should do next.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know we're coming to the end of this half an hour here. So, I typically like to ask a couple more questions, but, Shane, I really appreciate your time, your insights, everything that you shared with us. Definitely looking forward to having you come back in the future and talking more about some of the cool stuff you guys are doing at Conversocial. But I really appreciate you coming on.
Hey, thank you, man. I'm happy to chat anytime. And thanks for doing the podcast and spreading the word and getting everyone, on the train.
Appreciate that. Have a good day, Shane. See ya.